Okay, so now the battery tray and boot floor's done, we're onto the wheel arch. So this one is actually probably a bit worse than the other side, in that it's more extensively shagged and rusty. So I've cut out a section round here all the way around to there. I'm going to cut out some more of this, but I'm leaving that in for reference at the moment. Obviously what I'm going to do is create a piece, a patch that's going to go in here, butt weld there, and then I'm going to have a flange on it so that I can then plug weld it around there, and that way I can so I've just cut it out, and I'm just cutting away, grinding away some of the old welds and shite that was in here, and then I'll cut away here, recreate that L, that flat place there. So that used to be down like that, and obviously that used to be down like that, but it's all rotten anyway. So I'll cut that across there and then just put in another L piece there just to act as a point to spot weld through to that. And then you've got the underneath here. This is all pretty bad. This should all have a flange which has disappeared, so maybe try and remake the flange. And this patch here was just shonked over the top. There was a huge gap between the flange and the patch, which they just filled with seam sealer. And again, it's all structural stuff really, so should have been done right in the first place. So I've got to cut all this out here, and then finally I'm going to drill all the spot welds out where this panel overlaps this panel, which is the factory, and then drill all those spot welds out. Probably do some cut down there, a section down to here, and then put that back in, butt weld it down there, get it underneath here where it would then be spot welded through. So that's the plan at the moment, and yeah, got a lot of work actually there. Also got a hole here, but that's where the seat belt mounting point is, which of course we don't have in this car, so I just need to unbolt that, and then I can put a little patch in there. And then we've got to deal with this disaster down at the end, which is the end of the sill where that's been patched. I'm finding the sill's a bit confusing on this side, because on the other side it's clear they'd been replaced, or certainly the outer one had, because they've been seam welded all the way across the top here. But these all seem to have their original factory spot welds intact, so it doesn't look like this outer sill has ever been replaced, but it's pretty wobbly for a factory job. So yeah, let's worry about that another day. I've still got this to deal with, so just one step at a time. Okay guys, so made a start on the rear wheel well here. So wheel arch, inner arch. So this first piece that goes from here up to about there, so about a third of the distance I've got to cover here, or maybe slightly more than that. It's basically straight up to here, so you've got no curve here. Then it starts to kick in a bit here, and you can see how it kind of starts to snake in from here onwards. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do it in sections. I'm going to section it from here to about sort of 4-inch piece at a time, and I'm just sort of butt welding those together. Obviously I haven't dressed any of this yet, so I'm not going to go too mad, because ultimately it's all going to get a really good coating of epoxy mastic, followed by like an under seal. So yeah, so basically I'm just going to keep going in sections until I get to there, and then I've got to rebuild the flange there, and I've got to cut all that down there. But anyway, for the minute, just concentrating on this piece. What I have found very useful actually was, and it's a great thing just to have, I think, in your armoury when you're doing these kind of repairs, and you can see here, so it's not overlapping, it's just butt welded. Obviously we've got a bit of the old coating that's kind of burnt away a bit, so when I've been welding, so I've had to keep an eye on that and make sure nothing catches fire. But you know, once that's all dressed, it'll look a damn sight better than the original patch. You can buy a wheel arch repair panel from Wadham's, but to be honest with you, this isn't too bad. And what I've done is I folded a flange. So I had a piece of Zintec 1mm steel, 0.9mm 20 gauge, and I don't have any equipment for bending long lengths like this, so I have a very nice bunch of guys down at a local sheet metal place that'll let me go down and use their guillotine and their big folding bending machine. So I just got a sort of metre length with a 15mm flange folded on it that I can then just section off, and actually just to have some of this for general repairs. Likewise, I've also found very useful just to have some sort of 90-degree bent sections as well, just equal length sections, like for example where have I got one here? So I just have some lengths of that as well that I bought ready folded. Just cut it when you need it and use it as one. It's quite handy, saves a bit of hassle when you don't have all the kit. I would have liked to have done it in well, maybe one or two pieces, but I'd need to actually shrink and stretch this to curve and match the curve of the wheel arch. I can match the arch easily using my shrinker, just literally by putting that in there, shrink, creating the necessary curve, going in that direction. But it's the actual piece that starts to snake. It's not straight, so I can't just make it in one piece straight. It kind of goes like that. So, and my shrinker doesn't really have the guts for that. It's a pretty cheap one, so just it can't pinch together that much metal. There you go. So that's where I'm at the minute. So just keep on sectioning it and doing it in bit by piece. Okay, so got quite a way through this now. So I've managed to, I've patched all the way round down to there, just giving it a good grinding back, recreated this sort of seam panel here, which is then spot welded on, or would have been spot welded on there. Just need a bit more tidying up and a couple of holes to fill. So that's all done down to here. Now I've got some holes to repair here, but the rest of this seems fairly solid, so I think I can get away with that, just putting some patches in there. The main issue here at the moment is just this horrible patch here, which comes up around here and just is, horrible snotty mess. So I'm going to start by cutting this top piece out and remaking that, and then I'm probably going to replace this bottom piece here, because I mean they didn't even weld it up properly. I mean it's just horrible. Really rough. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I'm just trying to cut this out. Obviously just got a couple more welds hanging on here, so there you go, that's where we are. So I'm attacking the rear of this sill. So I had a thick patch welded on here, but that would normally be spot welded to the end of the inner sill, which I'm thinking is probably, this is the remains of that. Now the rest of the inner sill is pretty solid. I mean it's got a few little bits I'm going to deal with, but I am going to leave the inner sill on this side, and just focus on the outer sill and repairing any holes on the sill spacer, the flat sill, third part of the sill in between the outer and the inner. So with that in mind, what I want to do is rebuild. In fact, you can actually see the edge of that's the inner sill there. So I want to rebuild that out to where it would have been, which is probably a sort of probably 2 to 2, maybe a 2mm thick piece of plate, something really strong, because then this skin would have normally come down over that and spot welded to the end of that. So a lot of strength area I think is in there, and the way it was repaired before, there was no connection between this panel here. You can see I cut out a little window to start with, just to get a feel for how it was and see if it was spot welded on, but it was just like that, just sitting completely disconnected from the sill. So that's quite an important part to have right. So I'm going to continue to trim away. I'm probably going to, before I do that though, what I might do is I might just make up the piece that's going to basically extend from here and continue around there. So this is going to be one piece. I might cut this out and use that as part of it, and make it up before I put it back on. But at the moment I'm just going to make up the piece that goes in there. There's going to be the same material as the inner wing, so that's going to be a sort of 1 mil, 1.2 mil thick piece. Get the shape right on that, so that I then got that ready to go back on when I've put the new sill on, the new outer sill. So I'm going to make that up now, and then I'm going to continue chopping away the snotty horrible stuff that's here. Probably take a line down here for the minute, and just gradually work my way back, but don't chop it all away yet because I need it sort of to refer to, and then I can focus on repairing the end of the inner sill, repairing the jacking point, which I think is actually repairable on this side, so I won't need to replace that, and yeah, and go from there. Paper, lay it in there, sort of hold it into the curve, and then draw a line round, giving myself a bit of extra, so I've just got a sort of starting point to work from. So that at the moment is my template, just to create the piece that's going to go in there, or part of it will. So I'll just create that now, get it so that it's sort of fits in there roughly, and then that can sit to one side while I then start to rip it all apart and fix the rest of it up. I might do a slightly more detailed video about patch panels and making slightly more complicated ones, so this is going to be an interesting one to make here. So this was what I cut out. So this was slapped on top years ago and welded literally sort of with some slugs of weld in about 3 or 4 places up here. Huge gaps, didn't fit well, so it's just bodged on and then filled with body filler, with seam sealer. So I've cut that off. I've ground back the original weld that was down here holding this patch on, and the welds that held it on here, so I've got rid of all the mess, and actually what you can see behind it is the original panel. So this is original, and was sort of hacked away but then just pasted over, so they just hacked off the rusty bit and then pasted over it, and you can see the shape of it. It's similar, but you know, I mean, this goes much further back in, and this is the line that, you know, they followed here, so I think they may have even just pushed that out the way just to get in front of it with the patch. So I'm probably going to end up cutting most of that away, but I'm going to leave it in for the moment. But I'm just going to cut that away. It's a bit rusty around the bottom anyway. I mean, you could potentially weld on sort of like that, but I think probably I'll just make a patch to replace a larger area, possibly even try and open it up to continue so that it kind of covers the top of this bit here, where we've got some holes, but I'll see. Might be easier just to leave that for now. Certainly sort of taking a line like that, filling this hole up, dealing with that. So I want to make that, and it's a sort of continuation of the piece I've already replaced up here, which is tacked in, needs to be finished welding, but I'm going to leave that for the moment. And then what I want to do is create the panel, get it to fit, possibly just put it in with 4 tacks so that I can remove it if I need to when I'm doing other bits below. And also to get in here to the top of the sort of sill and everything else, it might be useful not to have it in the way. So I'm just going to create the patch and then go from there. So you've got 2 curves here. It curves this way and it curves that way, so it curves in and round. So what I've started off by doing is just literally holding up this piece of paper to the area and then using my fingers just to sort of rub it and create a sort of template, which I'll then cut out. And once I've done that, I can then start to shape it and try and get it so it's roughly in the right place, similar to what I did with this piece below, but probably go a bit further and actually get it so it's a nice fit. So I might as well video this and hope that it works and that it's useful for somebody who's having a go, because I don't claim to be an expert in this, but I've done a couple now and done a few over the time I've been welding on this car and the Stag. So I'll go now and I'll go and let's cut this out and let's go from there. Okay, so this is the template I roughed out. So all I'm doing here with a pen is just marking it a little bit more to sort of give me a cut line to follow with the grinder. I'm just going to make it a bit oversized and then I'm going to go out a bit wider. That was the mark I made on the template, and that follows what was there originally. But there was bits of rust around here, so I'm going to sort of flare that out here, and I'm going to extend this. When I put it on the metal, I'll probably extend it down a little bit further as well. So I've got a piece of Zintec. There you go. So that's going to be big enough. So just cut that out. I mean, you can use card and do it a little bit more accurately, but I find just to sort of, even with card, it's quite difficult to get the shape and then try and work on the shape. It's better to work on the shape. I find it's better to work on the shape as soon as I've made the piece, and then just use the actual piece itself to sort of bend into the shape you want. Like I said, this is not. I'm no Kyle Carter. So. Continue that down there. Just slightly oversize it. Can always trim more off. Right, there you go. So that's now marked up. Get hold of the angle grinder. It'd be nice to have one of those curved shears for doing stuff like this, because the angle grinder is just noisy and unpleasant, but it does a good job. Quick deburr. That's probably had it. Get it away. Right, so that's now roughly cut to size. So I now need to start getting a bit of shape into it, and I'll just use my fingers initially, just to put some of the sort of curve in there. We'll go over to the car and actually do it when I can see what I'm doing. So let's go over there now. So this is just 20 gauge, which is what's commonly used a lot. I'm not really sure how much you're going to be able to see from there. I'll just dump you there. So it curves most along the bottom curve here is basically going to follow that curve there. Then it basically curves but flattens out as it comes towards the top. So I'm going to try and recreate that arc as close as possible to that. Just manipulating it by hand. Somewhere handy. As the curves come towards the edges, you just can't bend that by hand. So I'm just getting a rough idea of what I want, and then I'm going to go over and probably use the vise to help get a bit more of a curve on it. So that's what I'm looking to try and achieve roughly. And then it almost has a bit of a step here, so that flattens there and then curves around that way. So what I'm going to do is put it in the vise, and I am going to basically add a sort of 15mm flange along here. Just bend it up so it's just bent up slightly there, because that will come in handy when it comes, especially when it comes to creating this curve in the metal. I can use the shrinker to help me do that. So let's just try that now. So I've got the old vise. So I'm just going to create that flange we talked about. And the way I'm going to do that is just grab a pen, right there, just to leave the vice jaws open a bit so you can get a sort of softer bend on it. Now as you do this, it's going to straighten things out. That's the natural way it's going to behave. So I've just created this little flange bit there. I think that's probably enough. I'm just going to check it. Leave you there for a minute. Yeah, that'll do for the moment. Now, then we have this curve here,
which has followed through to about there, but then it flattens right out. Now it does need to be flattening out a bit, but you do still need some here. So because I can't with my fingers bend that sort of distance of metal, I'm just going to put it in here and just do a few little sort of minor tweaks with it, with the vice. So I've created that little bit of a curve there. I'm going to check and see if that's enough. There needs to be more at the top. Possibly a little bit more. I can always flatten it out later if I need to. Okay, so I've created a relatively smooth curve there. Yeah, there are some marks on the device, but I'm not worried about it. It's on the inner arch. So what I now need to do is look at creating that swooping kind of arch following curve. And the way I'm going to try and do that is using the shrinker on this flange, because it's bent up a little bit more. If I shrink this, it will naturally create a bit of a curve in this piece of metal. I'll show you in a minute how that works. Have a look to see how much it has to be. Right, so most of the curve. So the curve comes down like that, and then it sort of levels out a bit. So it's kind of like that. So I'm just going to take. Oh, you didn't see that, did you? So the curve is going to be more sort of pronounced towards the bottom half of this piece, and then it flattens out towards the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this on the shrinker. This is just a cheap old setup I bought a couple of years ago. Got a shrinker and a stretcher. I think it was a couple £100 worth. The yellow one stretches, the blue one shrinks. So just start off by putting in a and already what you can see is by shrinking it, it's actually pulling the metal, but it's because it's not flat, it's actually a flange, it starts to create a sort of bow in the metal. So what I'm then going to do is, I've done it all the way up a little bit, now I'm going to give it a bit more towards the bottom half and then go and test it out and see how far I've got. So that's even more pronounced now. I'll give it a bit more. Okay, so you can see how we've created the curve. So I'm just going to go and try that out. Come with me. I can already see that's probably not going to be enough yet, but starting to get the curve. What you can see here is this actually twists back, so can do that quite easily by hand. So that twists around like that, and that's starting to look a bit better. But I just need to get this curve, and actually needs to be a bit more curved all the way up, but specifically towards the sort of bottom there. So back to the shrinker. Let's just pull a few more to it. Seem to be particularly behaving itself at the moment. It's working though, so. So that's looking a lot more curved. I've also got the twist as it comes up. So you've got the curve that way, sort of scooping up and twisted. So it's quite a lot going on with this, even though it looks quite simple. Okay, that's getting a lot closer. I need to possibly flatten that out a bit. It's a bit tight. Okay, so not far off now. Not far off at all. So it pretty much follows the line of the arch, but I left extra there, so I can just trim off a bit at the bottom. That's not a problem because it doesn't come right up the edge of the arch. It sticks back a bit further, and then I'm just going to weld it around there, seam weld it, and then, you know, frankly, there's enough of a shape there that even if it's a little bit out, I can just spot it in place with welds and get it close enough. This here could do with a bit more shape to it, so I think we need to bend that a bit more in. Close enough that I think a little bit more of a curve, maybe. Maybe not. I'm going to do is grab a couple of clamps and clamp it on the edge and see how it feels then, or looks. So obviously you've still got stuff in the way here that's pushing this out, but that's getting pretty close. It's got to be a bit further up actually, it's still going down at the moment. So yeah, close enough. I think, you know, I'm going to be trimming a bit off the bottom here anyway, and then this piece is a separate piece that I've already made up, as you saw a minute ago. So I would say that's pretty close and, you know, roughly the right shape, and it can be tweaked to fit. So I'll do that for the moment, and just concentrate now on getting rid of some of this rubbish in the way here, and then I'll probably just tack that in, so I'll come back to you in a minute on that. But that's kind of how I go about doing these things and creating these patches. Right, so carrying on. So I've chopped away this, so I've just got access really more than anything else. I mean, it was okay up to about that point, but I've cut that away, kept on. Got a little patch repair to do there, that's fine, I can do that later. So what we've got here is, with the archaeology, is I've taken away the old material. Then what we have here is, this is the bracket that holds the jacking tube that would have originally come all the way across here and up there. So there's a bit of it left there that was for some reason cut and just left in there. And then that is attached to the flange at the end of the sill and the sill spacer. So that is your sill spacer. That's your inner sill, goes up there, and out there, right? And you can still see this is part of the original wing that would have come down here, and it would have been spot welded to the end of the sill and the jacking plate. So the jacking plate effectively closed off the end of the inner sill. So you can still see some of the old spot welds here, but it's quite difficult to see them all because of this corrosion. So I'm just going to grind away this material here until I get back to what would effectively be this that comes across. So this should be a fairly straightforward repair then. So once I've cleared that out of the way, I can then put a nice thick plate back in, attached to the end of the inner sill and the spacer plate, and then I can then I'm ready to go to actually start putting back the other 3 panels that I've made, and put them back properly and butt weld them into place, then plug weld them to the end of the new piece that I'm going to put in there, which is going to be a sort of 2mm thick, nice solid piece there to weld onto. So that's next step. So as I said, I'm leaving the inner sill intact on this car, so I can at least get to that point, or certainly close to it. I may not actually fix it all in place purely because I'm still going to take off all of this outer sill, which I'm going to start after that, I think. So yeah, there we go. Okay, so I've done my archaeology, so here we go. That is the end of the inner sill, and you've got these flanges here. That one's a bit gnarly, so I'm probably going to just grind that out, and then I'm going to weld another flange in. So that would be a sort of the thickness of the sill material, which would have probably been about 1.2mm steel, so slightly thicker than, so probably 18 gauge. Yeah. So that there is the flange. Now you've got the inner, the sill spacer, the end of that comes in here. That isn't standing out as much as the other 2 flanges here, so I suspect
That's possibly been worked on at some point, or maybe even from the factory, to be honest, because this has been patched but it hasn't been replaced as far as I know. So what I want to do is create a good solid flange here to weld the replacement plate I'm going to put in, weld in here. So this plate here, which forms part of the jacking tube structure and bracket, would have come across here, down and back there. So that would have been it. So that there would sit over the end and effectively finish off the end of the sill, and then over the top of that would then be your inner wheel arch that would have then come over the top of the bracket and been spot welded to that bracket. So we've got a bit of flange repair to do for now, and then I've got to do some get a nice solid plate to put in here, which I'm going to make out of probably 1.5 mil. I'll have a look and see what the original thickness was on a good bit, and then I'm going to weld that in, possibly put in a piece behind it and spot weld that in there, so make it really strong, and then that can then be welded, spot welded, plug welded to the end of this, and also try and make sure it sort of somehow can join it here as well. I'm probably going to see if I can manipulate those flanges up a bit further out, and then once that's done, that's then the basis for then welding the rest of the inner wing at the bottom here, and this piece that sort of curves around onto the outer sill. So I might well leave that for the minute until I come to doing the outer sill, but just want to get this welded to that and all solid.